Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jamunati Ravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Gopijana Bhalava Girivardhari Jaya Gopijana Bhalava Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Swami Govinda Ki, Shri Prabhupada Ki, Bhagavad Gita Ki. Thanks everyone for attending this first of what we hope will be a regular Bhagavad Gita discussion. So we hope to stir the nectar, extract some of the wisdom from the Bhagavad Gita and from those who are putting the teachings of Bhagavad Gita into practice in their life. So first of all, Bhagavad Gita is not a book which you read and say, okay, I've read that book. And you might even get a Bhagavad Gita t-shirt to go with it. But it's not something like seen it, done it, next on the list, tick the box. It's not a bucket list item. It's actually something which can be lived. And although it was recorded 5,000 years ago, then it's not that it's become dated, because the principles are eternal principles. And therefore it means that it's always applicable in any day and age. And we'll find that actually even more so, it's applicable, just like medicine for example, Ayurveda, one part of Ayurveda medicine, which is the traditional medicine of India, is diet. And if you keep good diet, it gives you good health. And then if your health is not so good, then you increase the medicine. So similarly with the Bhagavad Gita, you practice these principles daily, but when your spiritual health is in more need, then more intense practice. So we have an invocation before we start to read or chant these verses. Then we invoke the blessings of Krishna, who spoke the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, and we do that by chanting this invocation mantra. So we recite that, and then everyone replies afterwards. And that is Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today's reading from Bhagavad Gita. So what would be good is if people are going to attend regularly, there'll be different speakers each week, different topics. Some topics, if anyone's interested in hearing any particular thing, they can make a request, send it to Raghunath. If you're living here at the temple, you can send them a text. Or if you're watching online, thanks for joining. And if you've got any requests, any particular lessons you'd like to learn, hear more about, then send a request to Raghunath. And the contact details will be...
They can message on Facebook.
They can message on Facebook. Okay. So today's message is perseverance. Amidst uncertainty. Perseverance amidst uncertainty. Which is especially relevant in the times we're in just now with this COVID thing. In the material world, things are always uncertain, but we'll go into that in a minute. So we've got a particular verse here from chapter 4. Chapter 4 is entitled Transcendental Knowledge, and we're going to chant verse 17. So if you have a Bhagavad Gita, then it's probably a good thing to bring it along so you can refer to the verse and the purport if you have any questions. And if you do have any questions, we will give some time for that, for some discussion. So if you're online and you have any questions, then just type it in and Raghunath will pass them on. So we'll go through this verse. It's Karmano hyapi bodhavyam cha vikarmana karmanas cha bodhavyam gahana karmano gati. The intricacies of action are very hard to understand, therefore one should know properly what action is, what forbidden action is, and what inaction is. So Srila Prabhupada, who's written this Bhagavad Gita as it is, there's many, many versions of Bhagavad Gita, but this is not a version, it's not an interpretation, it's called as it is. And Prabhupada's work, he shows how he's translated it word by word from the original Sanskrit into English so that one can scrutinizingly study this and see how he has translated it. And Srila Prabhupada has encouraged us to scrutinizingly study these books so that we can actually wean the knowledge from it. So Srila Prabhupada's purport or explanation. If one is serious about liberation from material bondage, one has to understand the distinctions between action, inaction, and unauthorized actions. One has to apply oneself to such an analysis of action, reaction, and perverted actions because it is a very difficult subject matter to understand Krishna consciousness and action according to its modes. One has to learn one's relationship with the Supreme. That is, one who has learned perfectly knows that every living entity is an eternal servitor of the Lord, and that consequently one has to act in Krishna consciousness. The entire Bhagavad Gita is directed toward this conclusion. Any other conclusions against this consciousness and its attendant actions are vikarmas or prohibited actions. To understand all this, one has to associate with authorities in Krishna consciousness and learn the secret from them. This is as good as learning from the Lord directly. Otherwise, even the most intelligent persons will be bewildered. Om Gyanatmarandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshunmilitamina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Tukam Karoti Vachalam Bhangam Lagayate Girim Yakripa Tamaham Vande Shri Girim Dinataranam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhanityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So just again, the verse, the intricacies of action are very hard to understand. Therefore, one should know properly what action is, what forbidden action is, and what inaction is. So this word karma is practically mainstream nowadays. But karma is divided into many different categories. And here, Srila Prabhupada is he's discussing three, or Krishna is discussing three, and Prabhupada elaborates on it. So there's three types of action being mentioned here. First of all, there's action, which means authorized action, forbidden action, and what inaction is. So this, what is proper action is also known as bhakti yoga, or devotional service, or akarma, or nice karma, N-A-I-S, not N-I-C-E, although it's also very nice. Devotional service is joyfully performed, it says, so it is very nice. But nice means, or akarma means activities which bring no material reaction. Or, as is sometimes said but not often achieved, as being in the world but not of the world. Sometimes we hear the reference to lotus feet, Krishna's lotus feet. So the analogy of lotus, this means that sometimes they say this, the lotus feet of the spiritual master. Just like in the temple, we have this prayer every day towards the spiritual master. The lotus feet of the spiritual master, are the way to pure devotional service. So this lotus feet means that just as a lotus in the water, it's sitting in the water, but it's not actually contacting the water. The stem is in the water, but the flower is actually above the water. It's not being, it's not touching the water. So similarly, the expert practitioner of Bhakti Yoga, who is the spiritual master, and spiritual master's disciples or followers or students, then they're also like the lotus, where they're in the material world, but they're not being affected by it. And it may appear to our mundane vision, or to someone's mundane vision, that those who are practicing Bhakti Yoga, they just look like the same as everybody else. They live in a house, they eat food, they drive a car, they wear clothes, sometimes they have a job, or they're simply doing what appears to be just like mundane things, or cooking, cleaning, all these things. And they think, well, what's the difference apart from the fact that maybe they look a bit different sometimes, or they read some book with some ancient language. What's the difference? It looks like they're not doing anything different. So the difference is the intention and the purpose, and what they're getting out of it, what the purpose is, what they're doing for. So this is just like you see a cat, sometimes it has a kitten in the mouth, it's carrying its kitten, or sometimes you see the cat is carrying a rat in its mouth. So to externally, on first glance, it looks like the cat's carrying the kitten, it's carrying the rat, but the destination of the kitten and the destination of the rat are quite different. The rat is feeling the joys of death of the cat, and the kitten is feeling the protection of the mother cat. So it looks the same, but it's actually quite a different experience. So elsewhere in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna elaborates in many, many verses how we can utilize this material world to extricate ourselves from it. There's another analogy given, which is just like sometimes in India, when we visit holy places, you do something which is called parikrama, which means that you walk to show respect to a great personality or to a holy place. Then you walk in your bare feet and you work around it. You do like a perimeter walk. It's called parikrama. And generally you do that in your bare feet. It's a little austere sometimes, but it gives it great importance. And sometimes by doing that, you might get some big thorn. You know, we've had some personal experience where you get a thorn, like really big thorn in your foot. And sometimes it can go in quite deep, but they say to get the thorn out, you can use another thorn to pluck the thorn. So one thorn is giving some trouble, but you use the same thorn to remove that trouble. So similarly, in the material world, if we're engaged in material activity or engaging all the resources, our mind, our senses, our body, our wealth, or whatever fortune we have, and the resources of the world, if we're engaging that simply for a selfish motive, then that becomes karma bandhana, or we become bound. It's interesting that this word bandhana, Sanskrit, means bound or bondage. Many English and other language words are coming from Sanskrit. But the same thing which is done for a different purpose, then that actually, not only is there no karma, which is akarma, but actually it frees us from past karma because it's directly connected back to yoga, bhakti yogena sevate, through service to the Supreme Lord. Then we connect. So the word yoga itself means to connect, just like the word yoke. Sometimes you used to see pictures, or if you're old enough, you might have seen some oxen which have got this big wooden harness around them connecting oxen together, and this is called a yoke, and it's a link, it links them together. So that's coming from the word yoga. Yoga means to link, and Bhakti yoga means to link with devotion, or through devotion to the Supreme. And Krishna gives us many different instructions how to do that. Man mana bhava mad bhakto manjadi mam namaskaru mam ivashikam satyam te pratijani priyosame. Anybody know the translation to that one? John? Very good. So John he gave the translation there. Basically, always think of me and become my devotee. Man mana bhava mad bhakto. Worship me and offer your love, offer your homage unto me, and thus you'll come to me. I promise you this because you're my very dear friend. So by engaging our things for the pleasure of the Supreme, we're recognizing that we are not the proprietor. Now, because of our past karma and previous life, then we have some facilities. Everyone's got some good fortune, some bad fortune. It's interesting, this word fortune, we see sometimes it's referred to good luck. And this word luck comes from Lakshmi Devi, who is known as the goddess of fortune. So because of our previous karma, we get some good fortune, which is bestowed upon us by the goddess Lakshmi, who is the consort of Vishnu. And it's interesting that because if we try to enjoy the material world, sometimes we're saying we want the kingdom of God without God. Or we want to enjoy Lakshmi without Narayan or without Vishnu. So when we talk about Lakshmi, then that means Lakshmi Narayan. But if we want to just enjoy Lakshmi separately or enjoy the material world without seeing who is the proprietor and the controller of it, then that becomes a source of entanglement. But if we realize that who is the actual proprietor and controller of this world, and let me engage everything and the purpose for which it was created. And let me gauge everything in that service. Then that's like watering the root of the tree. We become automatically satisfied. So when you water the root of the tree or the plant, then all the other parts of the tree become nourished and become satisfied. But if we just look at a plant or a tree and we think, oh, those leaves look a little bit dry, let me just pour some water on the leaves, then it might look okay for a short while, but it's going to dry up and the tree's gasping. It's going, oh, come on, stick some water on the root. Don't be an idiot. But so we have to put the water on the root, and then the whole tree. It might not manifest straight away. So similarly, when we're performing devotional service, we might not see the results straight away. But after a little while, just like the tree, when you pour the water in, then gradually it starts to absorb through it and manifest. So when we engage in devotional service, then we have to be a little bit patient. One of the qualities to ensure success in this science of Bhakti Yoga is patience. And if you don't have it, then that's a little bit difficult. But I remember when I was young and my mother should tell me to be patient, I would say, but I don't have any patience. It's very difficult to be patient when you don't have it. But we have to learn it. We have to learn to be patient, and we have to learn to be tolerant. And in this way, our mind becomes peaceful. So we have to engage in such a way that our mind becomes peaceful and satisfied, and then we can absorb this process, absorb these teachings. And in due course, when we practice these principles of Bhagavad Gita, then gradually it starts to manifest in our life, and automatically we become patient, automatically we become tolerant. That just is part of the course. So the other point being made here is, first we're talking about action, or which is authorized action. So just like if you get Srila Prabhupada, he gave an example that if you have a microphone and you want to work, you want to know how to work it, how to use it best, then you read the directions of the manufacturer of the microphone, and that way you get the best use of it. Or if you get a car, when you get a brand new car, or a new computer, or some other new gadget, then the best way to find out how to use it to its best ability is to read the instructions. Now you could just try to hack it, or just to do a hash job of it, where you think, oh, well, I won't bother reading instructions, I'll just mess around with it. You may break it, or you may find out how to use it, but you don't learn all the aspects of it, and you have a limited use of it. So similarly, this material world, the handbook for living in material world is Bhagavad Gita, which is spoken by the creator of this world. And he's saying how we can live in this world without being entangled in it, and how we can actually live in this world in such a way where we can achieve our ultimate destination, which is spiritual emancipation and liberation from the entanglement of material life. So he's saying, what is the actions which we should engage in? So we talked about that devotional service or Bhakti Yoga. And what is forbidden action? So when you say you were going on a journey to Mount Everest and you're going to climb the mountain, then someone would tell you this is the way to go and this is the way not to go. So they try to make it very clear that don't speculate, don't come off this path, because if you do, it's very dangerous. You're going to meet with calamity. So just as there is direction, which is what we should be doing, which is what is going to benefit us, what is going to help us to avoid entanglement and avoid misery due to that karmic reaction, then it's telling us what we shouldn't be doing if we want to become free from the miseries of this material world. So sometimes this is known as vikarma, and sometimes it's known as ugra karma. So vikarma means action which is actually detrimental to our well-being. And ugra karma goes a stage further, which means not only is it detrimental to our well-being, but detrimental to many other people's well-being. That's ugra karma, which is unbeneficial work, which is very destructive on a large basis. So these kind of activities, Krishna directs us in Bhagavad Gita, and this is good because it means that not only do we know the path where to go, but we can see these are the pitfalls. Don't get involved in this, don't get involved in that. And clearly, we can see what is the path to follow. In the Ishopanishad, it's mentioned that one should know the path of knowledge and nescience. Nescience, just like the word science means truth, and nescience means the path of illusion. So one should know the path of truth and the path of illusion side by side, and then such a person can enjoy the full blessings of immortality. In other words, one can become self-realized. And then finally, what inaction is. So sometimes people come to understand through analysis of the life's experiences, or perhaps they see other people. Just like sometimes when we see that someone is doing something which is causing them suffering, so we think, I'm not going to do that because I can see where that's leading to. Other times we learn by the school of hard knocks ourselves. We do something, we think, oh, this is causing my misery. So Krishna explains that we should analyze what are the causes of misery of this material world and learn how to disassociate ourselves from these sources of misery. And this is part of self-realization, is to, in order to realize what we are, we also have to realize what we're not. We identify with so many things which are not us, they're just some product of the material energy. Just like someone may come along and say, my dear sir, who are you? And they say, I am Mr. John. And oh yeah, but that's just your name. So who are you? I'm a train driver. That's just what you do. Who are you? I'm a father. So are you a father to your father? No, you're a son. So there are many different things, many different identifications. And these are what you would call relative truths. So there's two types of truth. Relative truth, which is in relation to something temporary in the material world. So today we may be this name or this faith or that faith or this occupation, but all these things are in relation to some temporary thing. And but that can change. One can change your name, you can change your occupation, and according to the cycle of samsara, repeated rebirth, then we can change our species, we can change from male to female to male. So, but all these different changes, all these different things we identify are known as ahankara or false ego. So we have our false ego or our false identity, and we have our real ego. So sometimes it's mentioned that we should give up ego, but actually, to be more accurate, we should give up the false ego, because the real ego shouldn't be given up, the real identification. So the point here is that when we can analyze what we are and what we're not, then we can discern the types of action, the types of things we should get involved in if we're interested in spiritual elevation, and the type of things we should avoid if we want to make progress in spiritual life. And the more we begin to understand our real ego, then the easier it is to actually persevere whatever difficulties we go through in our journey in this life. So earlier on in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, in second chapter, verse 14, he says that one should learn to tolerate the appearance and disappear. One should learn to tolerate the disturbances, happiness and distress, just like the appearance and disappearance of summer seasons. So they arise from sense perception. So just like at the moment it's coming into winter and summer is behind us now, and we're thinking, okay, winter's coming. But our experience tells us that your winter has started and it will go through for some time and then it will come back to summer. And then summer begins and that will come to an end. So everything which has a beginning has an end. And when we remember that, just like when summer comes, sometimes we become elated thinking, great, good weather. Of course, in Scotland, that's never guaranteed, is it? It can be, summer could be like a couple of days of the year. It could be any time of the year. Winter could be any time of the year. So when something has a beginning in the material world, it experiences, it always has an end. So if we become so elated by the appearance of summer, then when winter comes, then we may become disturbed by that. So simply, this learn to tolerate is the lesson here, is that when we learn to tolerate the elation of happiness, then we can learn to tolerate the difficulty of any kind of misery. So sometimes we want to just tolerate the misery and we just want to get right. And when happiness comes along, we just want to accept that. But we've got to remember, it's not that we make some kind of robotic behavior, monotonous type of, adopt a monotonous robotic type of mentality. But to always remember that something has a beginning, it has an end, so let's not be too elated by it. And then, so it's different sides of the same coin. So in this way, if we want to learn to tolerate the distresses of life, we similarly have to tolerate the temporary coming and going of our good fortune and our happiness. And this way we can see beyond it, we become transcendental to it. And this way we can actually attain a higher pleasure, which is constant. So Lord Brahma, he says that one who tolerates the reactions to their good and bad past karma, all the while performing Bhakti Yoga, ultimately, in due course of time, this stock of good and bad karma runs out, and all that's left is pure Bhakti Yoga, which is simply eternality, knowledge, and bliss, and it's unending happiness. It's not depending on some external thing. So this is what we're looking for. And when we can get that higher taste of pleasure, which is not dependent on some changing material thing, then we can persevere through any type of difficulty. So I'd just like to open it up now. If anyone's any comments, questions, or any points or they'd like to bring up. Okay, so there's one other point here, this point of inaction. So we talked about what is authorized action and what is forbidden action. So inaction would mean that, say you have a cure, say you had the cure for COVID-19, you somehow or another you stumbled across it in your kitchen one day and you thought, oh, I've got this COVID-19 and I just happened to find the cure for it, and you take it and you think, oh, that's great, now I'm okay. So you might be okay, but if you don't pass that cure out to people, then this is inaction. This is a failure to do some kind of duty. So we have this human form of life, and to do nothing with it, if we think, well, this material world is entangling, so let me do nothing, therefore I won't get entangled, then that inaction is a type of, that attracts a type of reaction, which is that we've got this human form of life and we don't use it right. So if we don't use it, we can lose it. So therefore, ultimately, when Krishna speaks about this, then it leaves to one who's actually intelligent, it leaves no course of action but to take the path of authorized action. To be inactive is not going to solve anything, and to follow the path of forbidden or unauthorized action, that's not going to bring us lasting happiness. But to engage in the path of authorized action, that is which is going to liberate us from material entanglement and which is going to bring us lasting satisfaction and deep, lasting happiness. Yes.
Initially, you were saying most people are bewildered as to what action to perform. So, and that's due to the false ego, really. So they're kind of stuck in that situation. And what is the best way to show people an alternative? I mean, people may be looking for alternatives, but they may be looking for in a particular way. They may have a particular preconceived idea of what they think the solution is, but because of their false ego, it won't actually be the solution. So is there a long-term program that you cannot just immediately go to people and just say, okay, well, look, you're not acting properly, this is what you need to do, but it's something which we have to kind of cultivate over a period of time, people become more aware of a positive alternative. A way of life which is superior, healthier, happier, more blissful. Maybe that will take time for people to see that, to experience that, to expose them to that.
Yeah. Okay. So, if I understand you correctly, you're basically saying it may take some time for the people in general to come to this path, and how can they come to this path? Yeah. So Srila Prabhupada mentions here in the beginning of the purport that one has to apply oneself to such an analysis of action, reaction, and perverted actions, because it is a very difficult subject matter. So this applying oneself to try to understand, to apply analysis of this, what is good for us and what is going to cause us some problem. This is going on anyway. So even if people aren't reading Bhagavad Gita, sometimes people by their own analysis are realizing that I'm doing something which is causing me suffering, let me give it up. Just like sometimes people may have a drug or an alcohol problem, and they may feel some pleasure when they're taking it, but when they're coming off of it, or the next day hangover, they think, never again, I don't want to do that again. But because they don't find some alternative, then they fall back into it again. So this is called Bhoga Tyag, or enjoying and renouncing. Renouncing is called the pendulum effect. That sometimes we enjoy so much that we think, oh, I've enjoyed so much drinking and drugs, etc., but now it's causing me so much suffering, I have to give it up for a while. So we renounce it for some time. We want to enjoy, and then we have to renounce. Just like we might have a favorite meal, but we can't sit there all day eating it. We have to not eat for a bit, do something so the stomach can become empty again. We have to make our life worthwhile, that we can deserve a meal again. And so many things we engage in. Anyway, so the thing is that naturally people will try to improve their lot, and we see that, for example, the move for many people to become vegan, that itself is increasing in the quality of compassion. If their motivation is that they don't want to be the cause of causing some other living entity to suffer, then this is a good thing. This is a path, a step in the right direction. And other things, Prabhupada talked about material compassion is the beginning of devotion. So when people try to apply material compassion, then this is good, because it means that they're taking the mind off themselves. And they say that if you want to, one way to give up your own suffering is to actually help others who are suffering. So the person who's very selfish, they're generally so selfish that their suffering is so much magnified. But if you try to help someone else's suffering, you take your mind off your own suffering. Like they say, a problem shared is a problem halved. So a lot of our problems, or the suffering which comes from our problems, various difficulties, it's often, a lot of it is magnified by our meditation on it. Not saying that it doesn't exist, but when we take our mind off of it So there was this, once I met this old man and I says, what's your tips for a happy life? And he said, the less I think about myself, the better. And he was a very happy old man. That's why I asked him. It was very evident that he seemed very open and happy and joyful. So his lesson was, he realized that by thinking more of himself, he suffered more, and by thinking less of himself and thinking more of trying to help others, then he actually became much more happy. So for those who are not taking directly the opportunity to read Bhagavad Gita, then through their own analysis, if they're looking to find a way out of the suffering material world, then they will very slowly, gradually find their way through. But sometimes, unfortunately, no matter how much they're suffering, sometimes they just actually don't see. So therefore, it's they're depending on someone else to bring that knowledge to them. And that's why we go and we give out Bhagavad Gitas to people on the street or houses or businesses or whatever. We try to pass on the message of Bhagavad Gita through Bhagavad Gita directly, or many other small books which are going to encourage people to read Bhagavad Gita. And we can 100% be guaranteed that there are people out there who are looking for it. Because we were. I remember when myself and my friends were on the path of self-discovery, we were looking at many different paths. And when we came across some Krishna conscious magazines, it was referring to Bhagavad Gita. We're thinking, what is this Bhagavad Gita? We need to find it. It just so happened that my brother-in-law had one I discovered some months later. And when I was thinking, oh, all my mates will be really chuffed, become like, everyone will be pleased that tonight I'm going to bring the Bhagavad Gita, because we've all been thinking, where can we get such a book? So we brought it, and then everybody was crowding around it, the Bhagavad Gita. So this is not an isolated incident. There's many people out there who are just waiting on this message. So there's a verse from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Brahmanda Konya Bhagavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasadi Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. The living entity is wandering through so many different species of life, trying to enjoy, sometimes enjoying, sometimes suffering. But when they, in their heart, when they start to ask the question, why am I here? Why am I having to suffer? What's this all about? Krishna is also in their heart, and he directs them to connect with someone who can give them the way out. So simply, they have to have that desire. And when we go onto the street and we chant, then we're helping to uncover their conditioning. Momentarily, they awaken, they connect with that spiritual energy. And when we go to on-street Om and online, when we're doing kirtan, people can connect with that and they get some awakening. And when we give them a book, we're giving them the opportunity to associate with the pure devotee by reading that book. So when they read that book, it's not just some dry philosophy, it's actually associating with Krishna, associating with Krishna as pure representative. And when we cook our food and we offer it to Krishna, it becomes prasad. It's non-different from Krishna. When people take this food, this divine food stuff, then also this connects, and this is also Bhakti Yoga. It's so simple. Prabhupada said this process of Bhakti Yoga is simply chanting, dancing, and feasting. So it's not compulsory that we have to feast every day, but we can offer nice food or whatever food we're offering. Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita what foodstuffs are acceptable. We can offer that at home. Simply, we just get a picture of Krishna and the spiritual master, and we get some plates, especially for them, and whatever we're cooking, we can understand what is offerable. Some things are not offerable, which is ugra karma or vikarma, not forbidden activities. So it's a very simple process. The Prabhupada said it's so simple we can miss it, because we're so used to looking for long-winded, complicated explanations of things. It's simple. All we have to do is chant Hare Krishna, just chant it and hear it. Whatever we're doing, offer it to Krishna, connect it to Krishna somehow. Whatever we're going to eat, offer that to Krishna and then take it. There's no karma involved, and that food, that prasad, also purifies us from so much karma that we've been involved in, like all the animals that we were involved in eating, the karma which is there, which is in seed, that's all cleansed away. So for ourselves, we can step by step gradually disassociate ourselves from this material entanglement by analysis. Prabhupada says to analyze what is forbidden action and to help us analyze what is the path of pravriti, or to accept, and nivriti, which is to reject. Then these instructions are given in Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. So Arjuna is actually Krishna's eternal devotee, which means he's not a conditioned living entity like ourselves. But in order for Krishna to speak Bhagavad Gita, then Krishna arranged that Arjuna was in such an illusion that he asked these questions of Krishna so that Krishna could speak the Bhagavad Gita for us. It's actually meant for us. So in the introduction of Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada explains that in order to get the real essence of Bhagavad Gita, then we shouldn't just read it as some kind of scholastic thing or some kind of intellectual exercise, something like that. Actually, it has to be approached in the mood of Arjuna. If we approach it in the mood of Arjuna, then the conclusion which Krishna brings it to, and the benefit which Arjuna attains, which is that he's completely free from all doubt, and he's totally enthused to engage in the pure devotional service to Krishna. So this is what we can attain if we accept it in the mood of Arjuna. So the mood of Arjuna is to accept Krishna. So he, in Bhagavad Gita, verse 7 in chapter 2, Arjuna says, Karpanya dosho pahata svabhava prachami tvam dharma samudacheta yashri chanishitam brihitan mishashastaham tvam tam, what was that last part? Shadimam tvam prapanam. So he says, now I'm confused about my duty and have lost all composure due to my miserly weakness. In this condition, I'm asking you to tell me for certain what I should do. Please instruct me. Now I'm your disciple and a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. So initially, Arjuna had put forward so many doubts and so many reasons as to why he didn't want to follow this path. But ultimately, because he was totally perplexed about what he should really do, he wasn't confident that that his arguments were actually going to bring about happiness, were going to bring about freedom from misery and freedom from doubt. But he accepted that Krishna could instruct him as to how to get free from his doubt, how to get free from his troubles. So he submitted himself to Krishna and says, I'm perplexed, I'm bewildered, so please instruct me. So this is actually the mood where Krishna will then be able to impart the knowledge. So the example is given that if there's a piano teacher, may have two students. So the one student which approaches, who has no experience and who's learning from day one, who's never laid a hand on a piano, that student is the easier person to teach than someone who's been practicing on their own without any type of instruction whatsoever, because first of all, they have to get them to the point of understanding that you've got bad habits and you don't know anything, and then you can learn. So this is the point which Arjuna came to, that he had fully exhausted his reasoning as to his purpose in life, how he could be happy in life. He tried, so just like ourselves, we try so many things, but we don't find satisfaction in it, and therefore we're looking elsewhere. We may still be attached to so many things, that's understandable. Conditioning is there simply due to association. And in due course of time, by associating more with the spiritual energy, through chanting, associating, offering our food, reading, engaging in bhakti yoga, engaging in service, then our mind, our senses become purified and our intelligence becomes fixed. So in this way we can progress on this path, and for others, then we have to if we're interested in how others might benefit, then we try to think in our mind how we can benefit them by engaging them either knowingly or unknowingly. Sometimes we give prasadam to people unknowingly. To them, they might just be coming to get a meal, but they don't know that they're actually getting prasadam, which is going to purify them and will lead to further spiritual life. I'll give one quick story on that. I was in Paisley distributing a little book called Perfection of Yoga, and I stopped this lady, and she looked like a typical middle-aged housewife with all her usual concerns, out doing her shopping and things. So I stopped her and I says, "Oh, would you like this book?" She said, "No, I'm not interested." I says, "Okay, well, can you take this little sweet and tell me what you think about it?" So this sweet was offered to Krishna, and she took it. As soon as she put it in her mouth, she says, "How much is the book?" And I could see directly that as soon as she came in contact with Krishna through the medium of prasadam, then she got a momentarily awakening to inquire, and she took the book. She gave a donation, and hopefully she read that. So I think there was another question there, was there?
There's a question from Debrata in Aberdeen. I would like to know, Gita got 18 chapters, not 16 or 20. Is there any significance to number 18?
Yeah. The significance is if there was only 17 chapters, then we'd be missing out the 18th chapter. And Krishna concluded everything he had to say in the 18 chapters. So Srila Prabhupada said that Bhagavad Gita is known as the ABC of spiritual life. So everything that Krishna had to say to Arjuna, although if we want to read, even if we want to just read the verses without the purports, it will take us hours to do it. But Bhagavad Gita it was considered that Krishna spoke it in about 45 minutes. So the lessons which Krishna wanted to give were concluded within 18 chapters. And the postgraduate study of Gita, if we're looking for something beyond that, is known as the Srimad Bhagavatam. And then beyond the Srimad Bhagavatam is the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where we see that Krishna in the form of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he comes in the guise of a devotee to show us how we can actually love Krishna, how we can engage in devotional service. So I hope that answers it. If anyone would like to add anything to that as an answer, they're welcome to offer it. Oxygen.
Well, because we've just done back to Shastri, then it's helped us to understand that the real way to access the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita is in the association of devotees. And I've just been speaking with an Indian gentleman that I keep in touch with, and I'm encouraging you to connect a little bit more. And we have this opportunity now because there's the pandemic that we can have these scientists and allow us to share the knowledge and glean more information from it. So it's the association of devotees is a wonderful resource to help us get insight actually, because it's difficult just if we try to study the books on our own. Maybe one of the things we can learn from that is that we do need the association of devotees, because when we come into the association, there's so many things that we haven't thought of or looked at, and we get that by the association of the devotees. So if we run up against things and we're reading and it can seem like an obstacle, then it can stop you there in your tracks. You just decide to discontinue, stop reading, and get on to something else. So when you do reach that point, that's when you should look around and take the association of devotees, people who have been practicing for many years, and they can help us to overcome these obstacles, these difficulties that we have.
So in essence, what Hoksha was saying, if anyone didn't hear that, was that to get the full blessings of Krishna, which is necessary to understand Bhagavad Gita, then we have to study Bhagavad Gita and discuss Bhagavad Gita in the association of devotees. And in this time of pandemic when many of us are perhaps restricted to get association, then we can do that online as well, just like we have tonight's class, and then we have also other study groups like Ramananda Prabhu is doing Gita Life. So if anyone would like to take advantage of that, then they can also contact Raghunath to find out details of Gita Life. The Bhagavad Gita also has 4 seed verses, which are in the chapter 10 of Bhagavad Gita, and everything else which is said there is an expansion of that. And there is some other significance in answer to Debrata's question, but I must admit that I can't recall it at the moment. But Bhagavad Gita, those 18 chapters are sometimes divided into 3 different categories: the first 6, the middle 6, and the third 6. Does anyone remember the significance of that, Hoxtra?
The middle 6 are the inner shell, and the 6 preceding and the 6 after the shell of the Bhagavad Gita. So the essential,
The shower.
the shell.
Shell.
So the essential
Right.
teachings, but to access them, you have to go through the first 6, and the last 6 are also to kind of qualify that you would understand the other 6. The middle 6 are the most confidential.
Okay, so what I'll do is, because they might not be hearing you from here, so Hoxtra was just reminding us that the middle 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita are the essence, and the first 6 and the last 6, they're like the shell, which is surrounding the inner essence of Bhagavad Gita. To understand the middle 6, we have to go through the first 6, that's bringing us to the point of understanding. And after doing the first 6 and the second 6, then the third 6 is qualifying what's already been said by Krishna. So just like sometimes, if someone's going to give a class, they're going to give a lesson, they'll say a good teacher is going to tell you what they're going to teach you, and then they teach it, and then they tell you what they've taught you. So this is what Krishna is doing also. The first 6, he's basically saying, this is what I'm going to be teaching you, and then he teaches it, and then he says, this is what I've explained. So it's in that way. There are some other connections too, but also I can't recall them. Does anyone else have any other information? I know that Lord Shiva spoke the Gita Mahatmya, and there's many lessons on that which we can discuss in future Gita classes. So we encourage everyone to keep connecting, and some of these questions we can try to answer more deeply in subsequent lessons as well.
He said how if Krishna is willing to speak the Bhagavad Gita again, if Arjuna hadn't fully understood. He's willing to. He's asking if he's understood what's happening. If he's understood the inclusions, and he's willing to. I heard how he was willing to speak the Bhagavad Gita again.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is that Krishna gave Arjuna some instructions, and then he's asking him, did you understand the instruction? And he's giving it again in a different way. And also in the Srimad Bhagavatam, we have the Uddhava Gita. If you read that, then some of the verses are practically the same as Bhagavad Gita. And we see in the Bhagavad Gita also it's mentioned, Krishna mentions that I've spoken this Bhagavad Gita many times. I've spoken it to the sun god Vivishwan, Ikshvaku, Manu, etc. So the message of Bhagavad Gita is eternal. Krishna speaks it time and time again. Yeah.
Also, Bhagavad Gita is like a preliminary taster to get us intrigued, because it kind of briefly mentions the spiritual world and that we can be with Krishna. So that kind of piques the curiosity. So we're starting to think, okay, there's something beyond all this. Then we go into it with the Srimad Bhagavatam. Now we're going to get some insight now to what is going on in the spiritual world, what forms the Lord have, what are his pastimes, what message does he come down, how does he interact with his pure devotees. So we get that. And then finally we have the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And what we have with the Chaitanya Charitamrita is we have devotees showing how to access Radha Krishna Leela in the material world, really. They're basically just showing us how to get into the Bhagavatam on a day-to-day basis, how to lead a lifestyle which will be conducive for you to enter into this portal, into this other dimension.
Okay, so just to summarize so that people online can hear that. So Bhagavad Gita, as we were saying earlier on, is like the ABC of spiritual life. So where Krishna says there is a spiritual world, Aham Sarvasya Prabhavo, I'm the master of all spiritual and material worlds. So we're hearing there is a spiritual world, there's a world beyond this material world. And this is the nature of that material world. It's permanent, it's not impermanent, it's not transient. So he's talking about material nature and spiritual nature. So we're getting this ability to analyze what is spirit, what is matter. So therefore that is known as the ABC of spiritual life. And then the Bhagavatam is a postgraduate study where it's been shown to us what is that spiritual world. Sometimes the Lord is showing it manifest in the material world to us so we can see this is what the spiritual world is like. Just like an ambassador, say you'd never been to China, then some ambassador may come in and say, this is what China's like, this is how we dress, this is what we eat, this is our music, this is our culture. And then people think, oh, that's great, let me go and visit China. So in Bhagavatam, we're seeing many ambassadors of the spiritual world in the form of the Supreme Lord himself, who's inviting us back to the spiritual world. He's displaying his pastimes, and then other devotees are showing us how we can become a devotee and how we can come from so many different situations and become the Lord's devotee and get the Lord's mercy. And in the 10th canto, we're seeing and we're hearing about the pastimes of the Lord. His pastimes as he manifests in the material world, many of those are manifestations of his eternal, his Nitya Lila, his eternal pastimes in the spiritual world. He's shown us this is what it's going to be like when you come back to me. So he's saying, just keep on the path, and this is what it'll be like forevermore. It's like one long party. If you've ever been to a nice party, you think, oh, this is great, hope it never ends. Any time you're having a great time, you're thinking, you hope it never ends. And that's what it's like in the spiritual world. It's the eternal refrain, the eternal party. Lord Brahma in the Brahma Samhita says that in the spiritual world, every step is a dance and every word is a song. And then, lastly, the Chaitanya Charitamrita is where Lord Chaitanya and his associates are showing how we actually enter into the Lord's pastimes and how we can, how to associate with the Lord, how to associate with the Lord's devotees, how to live the life of a devotee wealth in this material world and experience the highest realms of realization and to experience the Lord's pastimes within the material world. Is that right? Does that include everything here? Anything else before we conclude? Toksha and then Felix and maybe Vrinda, she's had a question.
I was just going to cast an overview comment, which may encourage people as well as when we're looking at action and reaction and people being bewildered and having false ego, and you can see, well, the whole mess seems very complicated, and extricating people from it, even ourselves from it, seems quite a task, But I was thinking also what's nice is to reflect on, there's a lot of conspiracy theories going around and people are saying, well, this is actually what's going on, and then someone's saying, no, this is actually what's going on, and somebody else is saying, and we can say, well, actually, this is what's going on. And what's going on is that there's a whole strategy unfolding, which is that one way or another, people are going to become more spiritual, their way of life is going to become more spiritual, and Srila Prabhupada sparked off a whole thing which is now starting to take place. And it won't be any one particular person who does it, but it'll be something which we can just become part of it or become more aware of something that's already unfolding before our very eyes. And if you see it like that, then it's very encouraging. Like that in chapter, Krishna says, well, it's already done. So Lord Chaitanya says it's already done. It will happen every time in the village, and we're on the cusp of this right now. So that's really encouraging. While we know better than anybody what is actually going on. Because they're saying, oh, this conspiracy theory, this guy's in control. And the guy that is in control is a big yellow guy, actually, called Lord Chaitanya. And he's got the best conspiracy, and it is that he wants everyone back, you know? So that's what's going on. And it's just how much you're in tune with that.
So just to, I'll just try to summarize that again for those online. So what Krishna was saying, that there's many conspiracy theories getting bandied around as to what could be going on, especially with this coronavirus thing. What is going on is birth, death, old age and disease. That's happening. And whether this COVID here is here or whether it's not, we're going to, in the material world, we have experienced birth, death, old age and disease. And this Krishna consciousness movement, this Sankirtan movement, which is directly enunciated by the Supreme Lord himself, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Gauranga, then his will never be frustrated, and his will, his order is, and his, it's not even a prophecy, it's more than that, it's basically his will be manifested, that this chanting of Hare Krishna will be spread to every town and village in the world. And nothing can stop that. Nothing can, there's no higher power than the Supreme Lord, Krishna, or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, so there's nothing can frustrate his desire. Just like we may have some desire and some bigger, stronger, more powerful person may stop it, they may check it, they may frustrate it, but nothing can check Krishna's will. So just like when Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, he says, you can engage in this or not, but it's already destined to happen. By my will, this is going to happen. This war is taking place and certain people are being killed. This is going to happen. So when Krishna appeared 500 years ago as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to introduce the Yuga Dharma, Harinam Sankirtan, or the means of self-realization for the age, chanting, then he said, this will be spread through every town and village, and there'll be a golden age for the next 10,000 years. So that is destined to happen. We've seen it's already happening. Within only 50 years, there's hundreds and hundreds of temples, there's hundreds of thousands or millions of devotees already. And so much things which were a problem 10, 20, 30 years ago are now becoming mainstream. People are accepting things. Even in our short time here in the Krishna Conscious Temple in Scotland, when we were first here, every time we set foot in the street, the police would arrest us if we were chanting or trying to distribute the books. And on site, we'd get arrested so many times. But nowadays, tables are turning. If anyone bothers us when we're doing that, the police come and protect us. And the public in general, that's also changing because people are becoming attracted, interested. They're not hostile toward this message. So that is the real conspiracy that Hoksha is saying, is that Lord Chaitanya's desire, the Supreme Will, the Supreme Lord's will, that is the conspiracy that people don't understand. And because he is the Supreme Lord, then there's nobody who's going to control anything beyond his desire to see things happen. Was that accurate representation? Okay, and then Felix.
With gathering a momentum of reading through the books from the Bhagavad Gita to the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, is it always good to refer back to the Bhagavad Gita when doing that process? So say you're halfway through the Srimad Bhagavatam, isn't it like easy then to lose the thread of the Bhagavad Gita if you don't keep referring back to it?
When we read Prabhupada's books, we don't lose the thread, because we'll see that even in the later cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada keeps it very simple. He's still, so that we don't forget. At the same time, it's not that we read Bhagavad Gita and then it's years before we're going to read it again because we're reading the Bhagavatam and the CC. So Bhagavad Gita can be read daily. And Prabhupada was very much against people jumping, as he called it, jumping to the 10th canto. People want to just go directly to the pastimes of Krishna without understanding, going through the process of reading Bhagavad Gita, reading all the first 9 cantos, because these are there purposefully to help us understand Krishna's position, so that when we read about his pastimes, we don't misunderstand them. And there's one song which it's by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and it includes part of what Lord Chaitanya used to sing: Hari Haraya Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha Yadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namaha Gopal Govindaram Sri Madhusudan Giridhari Gopinath Madna Mohan. And then Sri Chaitanya Nityananda Sri Advaita Sita Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavat Gita. So these are the key elements for success in devotional service. If we want to join Lord Chaitanya's eternal Leela, then Hari, the Supreme Lord, Guru, we need the spiritual master. Hari Guru, Vaishnava, we need the Vaishnavas. We don't just have Guru without Vaishnavas. Hari Guru, Vaishnava, Bhagavat, Bhagavatam, and Gita, not Bhagavad Gita. Sometimes people hear them singing Hari Guru, Vaishnava, Bhagavad Gita. No, it's Hari Guru, Vaishnava, and Bhagavat, Srimad Bhagavatam, and the Gita. And we see that Lord Chaitanya, many pastimes, he was referring to Srimad Bhagavatam. So these elements assure, if we absorb ourselves in these things and we expose ourselves to these elements and absorb ourselves in these elements, then 100% success guaranteed in devotional service. And we should never forget the basics. So therefore, it's always good to keep the message of Bhagavad Gita. It's not that we become so advanced we don't need to read Bhagavad Gita any longer. Prabhupada says that actually, even if we just read one book, all we have to do is chant Hare Krishna and read Bhagavad Gita. We don't need anything else. That's enough for perfection. It's enough for us to go back to Godhead. And then say, even if we read one verse, if we understand one word, then we go back. We can actually perfect our life. Understanding one word means understanding this is spoken by Krishna. So if we understand who Krishna is, then Janma Karma Chimedavyam, then if we understand his appearance and activities, then Naitamamiti Sorjana, we don't take birth again in the material world. So we cannot limit the Bhagavad Gita because Krishna is unlimited, so his message, his Bhagavad Gita is unlimited, and even one word he speaks is unlimited. There's unlimited lessons, unlimited depth of connection with Krishna through that. Okay, is that all right? Anything else, or before we finish?
From my own experience, I've found that when reading Bhagavad Gita, the taste is there to read the other books. And
Taste there is too.
From reading the Bhagavad Gita, it's kind of like it ignites a taste for reading the other books, like Srimad Bhagavatam, but without reference to reading the Bhagavad Gita. It's quite it's easier to lose the pattern of reading, of the taste for reading.
That's true. So Felix was just saying that he finds that by reading Bhagavad Gita, it's easier to get a taste for reading the other more advanced books too. Also, is when you learn ABC and then you learn beyond that, you don't forget ABC. It's not that you just exclude that from your vocabulary. Or when you're in primary school and you learn 1 and 1 is 2, and then you learn beyond that, you don't think, okay, I've learned 1 and 1 is 2, we can chuck that away, now we just do the rest of it. Because that foundation of all your arithmetic is based on that 1 and 1 is 2. Your foundation of everything you're going to learn afterwards is this ABC. And the more we go to the foundation, then the more we strengthen that foundation, then the less there is any kind of chance that we'll become deviated. And no matter what difficulties we have, we'll be able to persevere those difficulties. If we have a strong foundation in the Bhagavad Gita, then we can tolerate anything. Okay. So thanks everyone for your attention and your comments and your questions. And we'll look forward to seeing everyone again next Monday. Someone else will be presenting with a different topic. And we welcome questions. If anyone has got any questions that they'd like to ask, or they've got any subjects they'd like us to cover on that, then feel free to make a request and we can make some presentation based on that request.
Or they may want a copy of Bhagavad Gita. We have plenty of them.
Yeah, you may want a copy of Bhagavad Gita, or if you have a copy of Bhagavad Gita already, you may feel inclined to want to share that knowledge by giving it to a friend or a relative. And so we have many Bhagavad Gitas in stock in our warehouse, and they're simply waiting there to go to good homes. And there's people out there in their homes waiting on a Bhagavad Gita, so let's try and connect them, connect the dots. And when we do that, when you help someone get to the top of a hill, you already automatically get there yourself. So when you perform this sarva upakar or sarvopakar, then this is the highest welfare work, is to give someone spiritual knowledge. When you give that, in the material world, when you give something, you have got less. In the spiritual life, when you give something, you get more. So the more we give that away, then the more we get.
And if we give 100 Bhagavad Gitas, then we'll have 100 times more appreciation for our own Bhagavad Gita.
So Tosh is saying that if we give 100 Gitas away, then we'll have 100 times appreciation of our own Gita. So it's the fact, the more we give, then the more Krishna reciprocates and he gives to us. So it's said that, that Krishna, with our two hands, if Krishna wants to take from us, then what can we hold on to? But if he wants to give to us, what can we hold on to with our two hands? We become overflooded with the nectar of Krishna consciousness. And when we become overflooded, then we give that to others automatically. Okay, so we could go on eternally here, so we better call it a day for the time being. And as we said before, there's also, for those who are not attending, there's Gita Life course going on. They can connect with Raghunath. He'll give some information about that. And we'll be doing the Gita classes every Monday. We also have Kirtan on a Saturday night, so please come and join us for that. Okay, thanks very much. Hare Krishna, Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Kodni Taima Prashashi ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande Haribo. Gaura Bhakta ki.